You all might see from yesterday's post, from yesterday's announcement, that I've actually put this up onto the Moodle. So what I thought I'd do today is just to go through this quickly with you, and then to show you a couple of examples as to what happened in Design Studio 3.1 last year. But we'll talk about that when we get to. So I'll go through the requirements, and then we'll talk about. I'll show you some samples. So the first thing is really that. Let me just expand this a bit more. So the first thing really is about the maximum number of panels. The maximum number of panels is 2 A0 size sheets or 4 A1 sheets. All right, but basically that's the maximum number of pages that you can have to show everything that you need to show. I say here the second item is that we need a 1 to 200 massing model to give us an idea about the mass. So I'll show you a massing model in a minute. But essentially what a massing model is that it doesn't have too much detail in it. It just has the main form of the outside of the building and any sort of other things that might be going on. So if you have screens and what have you, we'd like to see the screen as well, but we wouldn't really be needing to see things like doors and windows and what have you. It's just about the form and the shell on the outside of the building, okay? Now, this should be something that you're starting to think about now, and what I'd like you to do is really to, in week 14, to bring a series of these things. Okay, so bring in the development of these things so we can see where you started and where you end up with on week 14. Now, some of you have already started to do this, but for those of you who haven't yet, this is a good opportunity to start doing this. Bring your little 1 to 200 massing model into class, show it to your tutor, talk about it, and then we can talk about where to go from there. Okay, some of you have had some quite basic rough ones, which is fine, but those are all things that can be moved forward in terms of making it into more formal things. So Jade in my studio. Jade, where are you? You are there. So Jade had a really nice little model made out of foam core, but Jade, for someone like you would be starting to make that model to scale and to the right section and elevation, what we talked about today. That would be something you would bring in as a 1 to 200 model. Okay, so really you need at least one of those, at least a final one, but it will help if you had a few study ones before that, so we can actually see your development. Now, in terms of the drawings, really what we need is for you to work up those site analysis diagrams that you had in assignment 2. So you've got feedback on that. Some of them worked really well. Some of them needed a little bit more work. That's fine. This is your chance to work that up. And the difference now is not only do you have a second chance to actually give the correct information, you can also put your design in it, so we can see how your design relates to all of those things that you're analyzing. Okay, so now I won't go through all the different elements there, but the other thing that you need, which we were starting to do in assignment 2, was really the conceptual, interpretive, and precedence diagrams of your design, of what is driving your design. So some of you are using urban geometry, so this is your chance to use diagrams to see how that works. Some of you are using the site topography. Then again, you can use these diagrams to demonstrate how you have generated your plan out of those influences. Some of you are clearly looking at sun paths and protecting from the wind, and so your diagrams are an opportunity to actually demonstrate what you're trying to do from a conceptual point of view. So these are simple diagrams to show us, the people who are grading it, what you're actually looking at. Some of you are looking at how the building is seen from the highway. So show us things like where the viewing point is, where the target point is and so on and so forth, so we can actually work that up. Okay, some of you are dealing with screens, so show us the idea of screens and what they actually do to your things. And really, these are the kinds of things we're seeing from many of you right now that you can just formalize into diagrams, into better diagrams to be included. Okay, any questions? So, moving right along with the ambulance station itself, really what we would be wanting is all of these drawings. We need a site plan. Now, the site plan can show the roof of the building. I've said 1 to 250 because the site plan is not only about the site itself, but it's also about the things surrounding it, like the roads and the surrounding buildings and trees and so on and so forth. So a site, that's why I've made it a 1 to 250, because then it's actually it makes it easier to fit it onto the page. Okay. Now, also on the site plan, what you should be thinking about is the design intent of your building design, of your architecture, to actually go out into the landscape. So how does your building relate to the landscape? How have you designed the landscape in order to best emphasize and exaggerate those design ideas that have generated your building? Okay, so really what we don't want to see is the UFO building where you've put all your energy into this object and it's just kind of landed in the site and there's a couple of driveways in there. What we want to see is the same design intent, geometry, design intention of the building going out into the landscape. Okay, either that or design for the landscape that contrasts with your building, perhaps because your idea might be actually to make the building stand out against a sea of grass or what have you. Now, quite basic, 3.2, we need plans of each level at 1 to 100. Please put the room name so we can know what is what. And then we also need it to the level, to a quite detailed level. So we will need all the doors and windows to be in there, things like toilets and showers and kitchens. Now, please remember that all of these kinds of things, apart from the toilets, showers, kitchens, but also tables, chairs, couches, beds, and what have you, these are things that are part of the brief. So they need, if you're going to include them, they need to work on that level. All right, they're not to decorate the drawing, because if you put them in wrong, then it's going to detract from your otherwise good work. Okay, so think about these things with a little bit of consideration. You know, beds, how is there enough space to get around a bed? You know, should a toilet be in the middle of a room, and so on and so forth. Okay, once you have your plans, then from your plans you should generate 2 sections, 1 to 100 sections. Please take into account the site contours. You know, where your floor is and where the site is on each end of your section. So essentially, what we'll be looking for in the section is how you actually describe the shape of the building in terms of the interior spaces and the roof shapes and what have you. Don't forget to draw the section lines on the plans as well. And one thing that we always do, or that reviewers always do, not only us but our guest reviewers, is they will always look for the section line, and then they will always, in their mind's eye, project up on the section line to see what section would emerge, and then compare that to your section. So please be quite rigorous in terms of matching your plan to your sections. So the next thing is 4 elevations at 1 to 100. How these are traditionally made is that you use your sections as the basis for your elevations. Okay, so then that will tell you something about where you choose your section lines. If you have them in line with the actual geometry of the building, then you can also use that as a basis for your elevations. So what we then do is we also check the elevations against the plan as well as against the sections, just to make sure they're all coordinated. So this is a graphic thing apart from the design thing, where we actually want to see that you know how to draw these things. Two external perspectives taken from eye height, which show the building from close by. So what I mean by that is I want you to give us a perspective where you can see the entire building without too much stuff on the side. Okay, so these 3D drawings are really an opportunity to show things in the design which you can't see in the elevation. In the elevations, generally, it's pretty hard to tell what is in front, what is behind. So the perspectives are things that actually help you show these. Now, these perspectives are really the kind of hero images of the entire presentation. So please make them of a scale that is befitting of the view, and so that we can see what's going on, especially the external perspectives. So needless to say, you want two external perspectives. I take them from two opposite sides of the building. So that we get different, we get an idea as to what one side is like and the opposite side is like. I'd also like an aerial perspective from higher up, so we can see what the form of the building is like in 3D. It would be good too to have that from a slightly different angle to what you have the other two at, so we get a different sense of it. And then finally, an internal perspective taken at eye height. So what I mean when I say eye height basically is that you have to make sure that the viewing point of your perspective is about 1.5, so that when we look at it, we can relate it back to something that we see every day. If your eye height is taken too high, you know, that is like being a really tall person or a person that can float. Or if it's too low, then it's someone who's crouching. So all these things are kind of professional craft that we need to get used to, so that we can see everything on the same page. This is also another thing that reviewers tend to pick up because they're used to seeing images in a certain way. Aerial perspective, bird's eye view, obviously you want it to be high, but everything else should actually be at eye height, because the building will look different if it's not on eye height. And of course, internal perspectives are an opportunity for you to actually show us an aspect of the interior of the building that further explains your design intent. Okay, so there's no point giving us an interior perspective of a bathroom or a toilet, because they're pretty generic things. What we want is spaces that relate to the outside, spaces that have a certain type of section or geometry, and so on and so forth. Okay, now the way that these are going to be graded is that I'll make a rubric as usual. This one will have 7 categories, and they will all have the same weighting. Okay, but essentially the first thing that we're looking at is the integrity and transparency of your design process and thinking of the building and the site. So this is really about how you came up with an architectural concept, which was then developed into an architectural design and into a building. So at every stage, the practicalities of making and designing get in the way of that concept. So this is really about whether your concept, we can see your concept in the final design, and we can see how you've developed it from the original idea. The second criteria is understanding of the site and the contextual parameters and how this has informed the design. So this goes back to your site plan, but also it deals with the scale of the site and how that deals with the surrounds there. So again, what we want is for you to consider the site as part of the design and work with the topography. So the site does have quite a bit of shape to it. So if we then see a section or an elevation where the ground line is completely flat, and we can see from your site plan that it's actually going over the crest of a hill, we're gonna, that just demonstrates that you haven't taken that into account. So that's an easy way of starting on that. The third thing would be the quality of the architectural language and the clarity of form of the design. So you all have seen exemplars of fire stations, emergency services buildings. You've been to one that is a good one, and you study architecture, you study architectural history, so you understand that architecture has a language, and what happens on in one plane of the building always relates to other planes of the buildings in the best designs. So what I'm saying is that it's all fine and well for you to have an amazing plan or an amazing section, but if we go to the elevation and then your standard Revit domestic windows don't actually conform with your design intent, then that's actually, then you're falling down on the architectural language. Similarly, if you have a fantastic plan and your section doesn't go to exaggerate or amplify that design idea, then that is something that is also demonstrating that your knowledge of architectural language is not quite up to scratch for this level. Now, number 4 is really goes back to the functional brief. So how have you arranged the requirements of the functional brief within the design intent? Okay, so it's no good having a shell that shows this cranky, amazing thing and having this really different thing on the inside. They both have to work together. But on the same note, what you have to do is you have to make the functional brief actually work with the architectural concepts that you've come up with in plan and section. Now, point 5 is really got to do with the materiality of the building, so the sense of the materials. So how the use of materials, how you use materials to fit in with your architectural concepts. Okay, so this is one of the things which pulls it back to reality. So if we're going to want to see texture, materials, we're going to want to see why you've used those and how it fits in with your idea. If your idea is about weight, then what heavy materials are you going to use? If your material is about paradox, then how are you going to show heavy things as doing very light things? So how are you going to show floating or flying bits of concrete, and so on and so forth? If you're about using materials with texture, what is the texture? What texture does brick have? Does stone have? Does concrete have? Yeah, so it's about actually selecting materials for the purpose of the design, for a certain sense, inherent sense that they have. Now, on the same note, I've put in ideas of sustainability there. So basically, nearly all of you have done sustainable environmental techniques. So what we're looking for there is basically for you to bring the principles of what you have learned in that unit to the design studio. Primarily what we're talking about here is orientation and sun path and so on and so forth. Okay, so however your design is, you need to actually go back and look at how those principles are to be incorporated in your design. Okay, there's more than one way of skinning a cat. So if you have living rooms on the south side of the building, it doesn't mean that you can't get sunlight, direct sunlight into the room. You just have to do it in a different way to if your living room's on the north side of the building. Okay, and of course these aspects are all separated, but in the end they really all do work together. Number 6, the level and creativity to which the design has been developed and resolved. I think that's pretty self-evident, right? That goes also together with the progression of and development of the design, but it's really calls to an idea of quality as to how you've started from one spot and then how you've developed something into something that's amazing, or the level to which you've developed it. And finally, a design is nothing without how you represent it. So the thing to remember here is that the drawings, which I'll show you just after this, sample drawings, need to stand up on their own, okay? Because of course you'll be presenting them to us, and that's important to have a good presentation to get all the main ideas across. But at the end of the day, all of these projects will be moderated as well. Some of the moderation panel may not have been at the review panels, so your graphic communications need to stand up for themselves. Your panels will have to tell the entire story that you need to get across to us on the panels without you being there. Okay, any questions before we move on? Yes, Nicola.
Is the actual design, is that presentation very clear, or do you need to submit a portfolio on the thing?
Yes. So it's everything is on the same day. So essentially, you present during the day, and then that night you load up your PDFs. Okay. While we've week 14. Yeah, week 14. Yes. They are the panels. No, there's no portfolio. Yeah. Okay. I mean, put it this way: the only thing that's not really in your panels are your original abstract models, and the ideas of the abstraction, your ideas developed about the abstraction, will be coming through your design studios anyway. Okay. Unless, of course, you're using one of those conceptual models as the basis for your design, then you'd probably include some pictures of that on your panels. Yeah, so we're not asking for portfolios. I mean, portfolios, I know you're detuning your panels into a book, and you're also adding all the other stuff in there, so we're not asking for that, only for the panels for this particular design studio. Now, what I'd like to do now is to go to show you a couple of examples from last year's design studio. So these are A1, AO panels. Okay, so they're quite big panels. Now this one, if we just go into the entire thing, yeah, you can see that in this panel here, you've got a big perspective up the top, and then down here you've got really a site plan which actually shows everything around it as well as the building in it. And then a couple of analytical diagrams which as they relate to the design. Okay, this particular design, this was from 3.1 of last year, so this is what you'll be doing next semester. Now, I must say that the project chosen for last year's 3.1 was a little bit bigger than what's usually chosen for 3.1. All right, so that's why it's not always this complicated. So what this building had was a couple of basements, which you can see on the right there. But if you can imagine this as an AO panel, you can see that the perspectives which tell you the most information about the design are given pride of place. The second panel is actually more explanatory with the plans and what have you. And then the third panel is interior images and then sectional perspectives, which also give us an idea of the design. The other thing is that this one of the requirements for this studio was also to have a really developed model. So that wasn't actually shown in the things as well. So what you can see is that it's actually quite it's been done in quite a lot of detail. So if we go right in, you can see I've zoomed right into this small detail here, and it's very carefully calibrated so that everything is still really clear in terms of its line types. Yeah. And these because she had a very complicated plan, she used these exploded axonometrics to actually explain her design. For you guys, this is less of an issue because you're mostly dealing with a single or double-story building. But these were all the sort of conceptual models, drawings that she had to actually show how the thing was being used. You can see here the sectional perspective. We did a library, therefore she's put library stacks in there. You can see an idea of screen, you can see an idea of people, and then there's an interior perspective here, which you can see again is quite a large drawing in the page, which gives you a really good idea as to what was happening with it. So you've got this big hole in it, which has glass on the side and a tree growing out of it. Okay, yes?
How much do we judge on how many stories we've got?
Sorry?
How much do we judge on how many stories we've got in the station?
How many stories?
Yes, so if someone's got 2 stories in the station, there's a 1-story person.
That yes, it will be judged, but it will be judged on the basis of how it works as a complete piece of architecture. So if you had a particular architectural concept that required you to have a two-story building in order for that concept to work, then that's part of the thing, right? So we look at the concept first and then the configuration later. So we don't require anything to be, we don't require it to be single story. It can be as many stories as you want it to be, but it needs to work with that concept, and it needs to work as a functional ambulance station. So the problem with two-story things is how do the people get from upstairs to downstairs quickly? Okay, so that's, and it's way possible. There's a couple of my students who've come up with really good solutions. So that's just something that needs to be considered.
But that's the two-story company above. Then I'm not the one-story first.
No, we're judging the number of stories against the architectural ideas, not because it's one or two story. Okay. So here you can see again the interior perspectives. They're really clear and simple, but they tell a good story. They have things that give you scale, like people and furniture and what have you. Now this is going to be a very it's going to be a big ask to produce something like this, and of course we're not expecting you to, because you are a level below what this was, and this was an exceptional student. This project ended up getting 95% or something. Okay. But you can see that everything is very integrated and very considered. So the ground floor plan actually shows what's happening outside, what's happening with the landscape and what have you. And you notice what she did was she showed how to relate to the surroundings in the site plan. Okay, so the ground floor plan also goes out this far. We need to make a judgment because we have a big site and a small building, so maybe we can't do this. Okay, now we think that this is quite a good, where am I going? Wrong way. I'm really going the wrong way, aren't I? Seeing the pixels. So really what this was three A1 panels. You had the panel on the left, the panel in the middle, and the panel on the right, which gave us a really clear idea as to what the idea was and what the design became. Now, one of the nicest things, which is something that I noticed only today, is that these three panels, which look fine on the screen, and I can see everything that I need to see, ended up being a 1.8 megabytes. Okay, so there is. So what this means is that it has been carefully calibrated. All the images have been resized for the size of the panels, and then that actually makes it much smaller. Okay, so please remember that the size of your files does not equal to a higher grade. We had one assignment 2 that was 189 meg, and it had over 30 pages, but it wasn't a high grade assignment. So the number of pages and the size of the file does not equal to a good grade. Okay, that one ended up not getting a very good grade. And at the end of the day, we leave it to you to do it, but to have a compact PDF is actually a good thing. Let me show you another one. So what this one is it's struggling a bit, but this one had actually 4 AO panels. Okay, so you can see that there's one there, one there, one there, and one there. So again, you can see that a lot of prominence is given to this hero shot here, this single perspective that explains the entire picture very well. Yes, Kerry?
Like for AOs or for A1s?
I think it was for AOs, this one. It was, but our requirements for 2 AOs, okay? So 2 AOs is a lot of real estate.
You've got 1 AO and 2 A1s. Have you not? Two A's and 4 A's.
2 AOs or 4 A1s, Kerry?
I don't know why. 1 A.
Hmm?
I don't know why. 1 A.
Okay, moving on. So what we can see here is they've got one really hero image that's showcasing the entire presentation. So that's really a good thing, because they are going to be images that tell you more than others' perspectives. So what you want to do is to make those bigger. And you see the other two that it's got here, which are the interior ones, are much smaller compared to that. Yeah. This one, by the way, was 3.6 meg. So it's also actually quite a compact one in file size, but also it still gives you a good idea. So what they then have here is this drawing here, which was the main plan. The main plan here, and you can see that the main plan sits in the site. What was good about this one was it actually had a key as to what the rooms were, and it had all the numbers over there. It shows how the geometry of the site actually affects the design of the landscape, and how it affects everything: driveways, paths, the direction of steps, and what have you. Then it has the other plans over on the side here, so the upper two plans here, and then the basement plan here. Okay, and then this was, and then the sections, they've gone and used a sectional perspective in order to present their sections. So if you would like to do a sectional perspective rather than a section, that's fine with me. But drawing a section is probably simpler than drawing a sectional perspective. Okay, again, because it was a multi-story building, they've exploded it just to show how everything relates to each other. And you can see here that that John has actually got a different set of geometrical of analytical diagrams to do specifically with his particular project. Okay, now what have we got over here? So that is those are the 4 panels. So so what you'd be looking at, of course, is half of this, 2 AO panels. So needless to say, this won't be able to be quite as big as this, right? But I think you get the idea. Are there any questions with regards to this? Okay, so from here, where you guys need to be, you guys now know what you need to produce. It's pretty basic, really. At the end of the day, we need a site plan to show what's happening on the site. We need a ground floor plan. We need a roof plan, which you can show on your site. We need sections and elevations, and we need some perspective views. Okay. So this is really a pretty standard requirement of all design studio type projects. So I think what you should now be doing is not so much to worry about what you need to draw, because you know what you need to draw. What you need to be worried about now is actually developing up your designs. Okay, not only in terms of designing the building, but also in terms of designing the site, so that we have a complete design. Any questions? No questions? Thanks, everyone.